In this video, I'm going to be highlighting 3 ways in which music producers sabotage their own music production. I know because I've done these 3 things before, so I want to make you guys aware of them so that you don't fall into these traps. That's all coming up. Hey, how's it going, guys? It's John Holt here with The Audio Journey, helping make music production accessible to all. And here on this channel, what we do is a variety of music production tutorials, mainly focused towards beginners and beyond. So if that's something that you might be interested in, then definitely consider subscribing. And to go alongside this, we've also got a Facebook group called Music Production Explained, which the link is in the description below to go and join. So, the observant ones among you will notice that I'm not in a music studio today. I'm actually in a field. I've taken a little stroll, clear my head, and sit down and chat to you guys about 3 ways in which music producers sabotage their own music making. And as I mentioned, this is something that I am incredibly guilty of myself. All of these 3 things, I'm a serial offender and will probably continue to be. But I've become aware of them, and it's really helped me to be aware of them, so I want to share them with you guys today. Now, number 1 is perfectionism. Now, you're probably going to hear this a lot, but perfectionism is the enemy of creativity, and that is so true. So I want to give you a little phrase to keep in your mind when you're endlessly tweaking something, thinking, I can get this better, this isn't quite how I want it. This is what I want you to remember. Done is better than perfect. One more time. Done is better than perfect. Now, etch that onto your heart, that you really need to keep that. Damn, that dog is going for it. Now, this is so important to remember as a music producer, because it's so easy to fall down the rabbit hole of, I'm not going to release this until I've got it perfect, until I've got it better. I know I can do better. Now, while you should always strive to make the best stuff you can, you will get perfection paralysis and not release anything if you hold yourself to this higher standard. Now, another thing that we really like to do when we've got our perfectionist hat on is compare ourselves to other people. Now, I'll preface this by saying there are instances when you're making music that it's definitely beneficial to compare your music to other people's music, and that's when you're using a reference track. Now, when you're using a reference track, you're doing some little comparisons, and I've talked before about this, but that's a beneficial way to compare your music to other people's. It's not beneficial to compare your music to other people's when you're comparing yourself as a beginner or an intermediate producer to a professional quality track. The reason for this, and the reason it's such a futile exercise, is because that person has been making music for a lot longer than you have, and they've reached a standard where you now know about their music, and that doesn't happen overnight. Even if they're only late 20s, they've probably been making music for 10-15 years, and comparing your music to their music is just absolutely futile because they're much further along the path than you. And it's completely unfair on you to be judging your music by those standards. It's like, no, what you need to be comparing your music to is the last track that you made. You need to make sure that you're moving forwards and don't give a about the pace that other people are moving forwards at, because comparing yourself to someone that's much further down the path is just, it doesn't make any sense. So what I really want to lock in for you is the fact that you need to be comparing your music to your last track, to where you were a year ago, because that's where you're going to see progress. And as long as you're moving forwards in that way, that's all you need to focus on, because trying to achieve the standard of someone that's much further along the path from you is just absolutely futile. Rant over. Well, kind of. On to number 2. The second thing that people do to sabotage their own music production, including myself, is overconsumption of tutorials. Now, you're probably going to be sat there thinking, John, you make music production tutorials. Yes, I do. And I still think this point is really valid. And what I want to get across to you is that you should be spending more time on making your own music than you should consuming tutorials. Nearly forgot my point there. You need to be concentrating more on making your own music, that kind of creative side of things, than the technical side of how to EQ from a tutorial or something along those lines. The reason I think this is such a common trap to fall into is because you feel like you're being productive, you feel like you're learning something, but the fact of the matter is you are going to progress so much quicker if you're making your own music and you pick out little bits to learn sort of along the way. And there's a strategy that I like to use for this, and this is what I like to do. Firstly, I like to set really clear intentions when I sit down to make music, because like you, my time is limited when I get to sit down and make music. So I like to set a clear intention, and that will be maybe, right, I've got 45 minutes, I'm going to get a solid drum pattern down with a few variations, and then I'll do that again, and I'll do bass. And once I've finished a track over the course of a week or 2 weeks doing this, then what I'll do is I'll review the track, get some feedback from people, and hopefully they'll point out something like, really like the melodic content of this, really like how it flows. What I think you should work on is the way that the kick and bass sit together. I think that low end kind of mixing section is something that could be improved in the next track. Cool. What I do then is I spent maybe 8-10 hours working on that track. What I'll then do is I know that mixing is something that I need to work on. So I'll spend half an hour to an hour maybe looking for some tutorials on how to make the low end sit well in a mix, and learn some EQing bits, pick up a couple of tips, and then repeat the cycle. Make another track, 8 to 10 hours, you get what I mean. So pick out things that you know are going to be instantly applicable, spend a minute amount of time in comparison to the time that you spend making music, consuming those tutorials, and then instantly put that back into practice. I think that is the best way to consume music production tutorials, probably more so for people that are towards the later end of being a beginner. Like, you know the basics of Ableton, you know how to sort of get MIDI patterns down and get audio down and finish and export a track. It doesn't have to be to a high standard, but once you're at that standard, this is what I would suggest in terms of consuming tutorials moving forwards, because it's so easy to just binge and binge and binge on tutorials. That's not beneficial. So take that little formula, apply it to your music production for a few months, and see how you get on. I'd be really interested to hear how you get on with that. Let me know in the comments below, or in the Facebook group, which I mentioned at the start. Point number 3, and the light is starting to go, so I'm going to need to hurry up with this. This point is going to sound like a contradiction to my last point. My last point was that people overconsume tutorials. Point number 3 for me is that people are too obsessed with the gear and they don't focus enough on education. Now, you're probably going to be sat there thinking, John, you just directly contradicted yourself. But hear me out, because this is my opinion on this. Let's work on that example from the previous point of I need to get better at mixing and I need to get better at EQing. Something that people tend to do at this stage, if they're starting to finish their own tracks and they know they need to improve, they get sucked into the trap of, right, I'm going to buy plugins, or I'm going to buy some hardware because that's going to make my mixes sound better. And if I buy this shiny Waves or FabFilter EQ, then I'm going to get much better at EQing. And I've got a little bit of money that I want to spend on it. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't think that is the best use of your money. What I would personally do instead is find a producer that you respect, find a producer that you like that's probably on a small level that you can sort of get in touch with, or find really good music production tutors somewhere like Pyramid, which I'll put a link for in the description below, and get someone to teach you how to use the EQ that comes inside your DAW, because I promise you, you will get such better results if you spend an hour or 2 hours with someone that really knows what they're doing with EQ, teaching you how to use it, than if you spend that money on a fancy new EQ that you still don't know how to use to its most effective level. So a really good example of this, or analogy if you will, is if you took a really, really good painter and gave him some crappy crayons or her some rubbish paint and a canvas, they're going to come out, down these flies, they're going to come out with a really, really good painting regardless. They're going to come out with an awesome piece of work because they have that skill set. Whereas you could give me a blank canvas and the best paint in the world, the nicest oil, pastels, whatever, I'm still going to come out with something that looks like it's been run over because I don't have the skill set of painting. So it doesn't matter what tools you've got, it matters how good you are at using them. So as I said, don't over-consume tutorials, but when you're being focused about what you want to learn, don't spend money on gear to try and get there. Spend money on some really focused, tight-knit education from the right places, because that is how you're going to really, really see improvement really nice and quickly. You're going to get insights that it takes people years to learn the kind of stuff that they know, and if they're willing to share that with you, that is worth a little bit of your money, as opposed to spending it on a plugin that again, you're still not going to know how to use to its most effective level. So that would be my tips for tutorials: is do it in a focused manner, spend a small amount of time on it compared to your actual music making time, and when you are consuming tutorials, forget the gear, just focus on getting the best education that you can in that little bit of education that you're having, because that's how you're going to really maximize your results. So there we go, guys. I'm really sorry the light is starting to fade here, but just before you go, I would seriously recommend joining the Music Production Explained Facebook group, and I'm active in this group every single day. So if you get into that group and ask a question, you're going to get a response within 24 hours. I do live streams in there every week, which are Q&As, so you can come and ask me questions. You can submit questions beforehand to get it answered even if you can't show up. I also give track feedback in there as well, and we've got some awesome people in there, some really talented producers that are on hand to answer questions as well. We're building up a community of beginners where you can ask those beginners questions and not get judged for it. So definitely head over and join that. If you've got any tutorial requests, definitely drop them down in the description below. Would love to know what you think of this one as well. And I will see you guys in next week's video. Thank you very much for spending a bit of time here today, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.